What I want to do here is I want to take this next step, and I want to illustrate to us the nature of what is essential to understand when making sense of these astrological transits. So I'm going to show you some slides of what has their story been, what's in your cellular memory, and then I'm going to bring some slides, some charts up, and I want to show you these really profound critical points that would show the astrology of the awakening. But in order to understand this, we need to be able to transcend our limited thinking. And what I mean by limited thinking is our relationship to that one life, but understanding the psyche and how the psyche works. And that there are multiple layers of expression and impressions held within our collective psyche. And that when we have aeons or ages move through us, themes arise out of those archetypes, and those themes become the thing that we process as a human race that's evolving us. And so, as I said, the Pluto and Virgos, you come in at a time where the theme is the progressive rejection of religious ideologies and perspectives, and the realization of spirit into matter, and then through that process, the illumination into individuation, true sovereignty, right? And so to be able to understand this, we need to understand the psyche. And this image captivates it so much because the psyche has multiple layers, it has multiple expressions, and that there is a force that's there that is ultimately, you know, the nature of our interpersonal relations. And there are multiple expressions of this. So Jung wrote it like this in a very brief way. He said, by psyche, I understand the totality of all psychic processes, conscious as well as unconscious. So the relationship to what you see here today is not just simply there as it is. It is an expression of unconscious dynamics that are very subtle and very nuanced, that are playing themselves out. And so what you see on the surface is a mere reflection of what's actually occurring at a deeper level. And that deeper level is where the archetypal mythology exists. Okay. So again, to kind of really put this across in a very profound way, what is the collective unconscious? And this is the reason why I'm focusing on the collective unconscious is here, is so that we understand that what we are interacting with in our reality at the moment is coming from a place that's beyond what our egos can sense and make aware to. That's why we can feel so overwhelmed as we try to digest the complexity of life at the moment. The culmination of this Pisces age is revealing to us everything that is held within this collective unconscious. And when you start to see it this way, you'll start to be able to then try to make sense of so much things happening at once, and how we are individually embodying these psychic impressions and experiences that we have all as a human race in our memory lived through. Okay. And so right now, as we live in 2019, what we are experiencing right now is the sort of growth of the original imprints that took place in, you know, with Uranus and Pluto's conjunction in Virgo. Like, we're witnessing the collapse of the order, and that is manifesting from this deep unconscious symbolism that is held within that archetypal structure, and that it is speaking even deeper to the closing of the ages of Pisces, and this separation complex and duality complex. We're all trying to make sense of it. So the collective unconscious, so far as we can say anything about it at all, appears to consist of mythological motifs or primordial images, for which reason the myths of all the nations are its real exponents. And so we're all of us, so we're sitting at the top over here, right? We see feminism. And the question I want to ask is, why does that exist in our world? Why does the polarity of feminism exist as well, with sort of like extreme right wing? Why is there such a divide? Or why is, for instance, like Donald Trump holding our projections of our own unresolved and wounds and sufferings that we all experience? In 1991, for instance, if we had all seen him sort of on his TV show, we would have a specific sort of observation of his reality. But now, as the president of America, he becomes completely different. He metamorphosizes not in his image, but in our image. And it's those timelines and the representation of his meaning that is really something that we've got to observe. And so every person and your relationship to reality is a reflection of the primordial image that is held within you. And your relationship to this thing and your biases towards these things are all there that need analysis. In other words, you need to ask yourself, what is this external representation of John Tom, for instance, revealing about my own inner personal psychological relationship to life? What are my judgments? What are my biases? What are my perceptions? And that's just one aspect. You know, you can, like I said, you can look at the phenomena of Jordan Peterson, for instance. You can look at the phenomena of Cortez. You can just observe reality, and you can see all these really interesting things, and why we are so compelled at the moment to try to make order out of chaos, which is ultimately what's occurring here. And that's something that's really important to understand. And I'll get into it in terms of this idea of order and chaos, or involution and evolution. So, in fact, the whole of mythology could be taken as a sort of projection of the collective unconscious, right? This is highlighting here. So we can therefore study the collective unconscious in two ways, either in the mythology, right? What is the symbolic representation of our imaging that Donald Trump, for instance, is holding for America, or in the analysis of the individual, right? As we analyze our own inner relationship to this thing. And this yin-yang kind of approach, or this interplay between these two sides, gives us a very profound insight into the middle. And that's what the Christ consciousness was really about. It was insight into the marriage of these two polarities. That was really what this is about. That's embodiment of spirit. Here's another one that I want to highlight over here. And I love this so much, because now what I want to do is I want to show you, if you see the imagery of the field over here being the watery unconscious, and then what arises out of the watery unconscious, which is just exactly that. It's just watery unconscious. It has no bias. It has no intention. It doesn't have the psychological relationship to the perception of reality that we as human beings project onto it. It just is. That's like the natal chart, for instance. It is just symbols there. But once we interact with it, we animate it, anima. We give spirit to it, we give rise to it. And so when we give rise to something, we've always got to observe, what are we projecting into that thing that's rising, that is a reflection of our own inner psychological dynamic. And so I found this picture so incredibly touching, because it speaks to, on one level, the sort of downfall of a time in which the kind of very prominent masculine energy of awareness is reached its culmination. It reached its end cycle. It started with something, and then it reaches its end. It's this life and death process. And for the most recent years of our psychological and emotional memory, the point here at the top of the spire is the domination dynamic. It's intent. And you'll look at most wars, for instance, will have this very spiked edge that leads us into control and into moving things. And it's anti-sensitive, it's anti-life in that way. And yet it's also very progressive in the sense that it got us to the reality that we have here today, which is your home and your electricity and the car that you drive, and the ability to read, and the structure and the form that was put in place in order for the things that you as a human being can use to interact with this video. Think about it. We're very, very critical of the institutions and the roles that they play. And yet those institutions were the very reason as to why you can comprehend to a certain degree what's written on this thing here, how you can organize your day. You can write the articles you can write about the things that you hate. And so it's a very, very confrontational picture, because it asks us to observe the motifs. And so this is the point here. The more one becomes aware of the contents of the personal unconscious, this here, the more is revealed of the rich layer of images and motifs that comprise the collective unconscious. And so, like I said again, as the fall of this time in which we had established this very sort of, structured, institutional, left brain orientated world, as it collapses back into the ocean and it holds within it the memories of what we have discovered about ourselves as a human race, it also speaks to how we are all, in a sense, very, very susceptible to that. As we flee it, we don't feel grounded. And this is something that's very profound, right? We're rootless. And as we are rootless during this time of collective shift, just as when you went through an individual experience in your life of change, you felt rootless in your experience. And so when the whole entire world goes through an experience of feeling rootless, how do you think we're going to feel stable? How do you think you're going to feel okay in structured form? You can't. So what's the antidote to chaos? It's order. What's the antidote to too much order? Well, it's involution, it's chaos, it's restructuring things. And so that's what we are. We're at this incredibly profound time in our human evolution in which the structure that once held the very image and motifs and the mythology of our existence is literally falling. And as we interact with that, we realize the contents of everything that has existed. And within that sense also comes the immense amount of feeling lost. And the only way out of this process really is to unify the inner and outer reality for yourself, and to navigate what is individually true for you, which can be on and of itself an incredibly profound and disturbing experience, you know?